Okay, welcome to the DTAP podcast. My name is Roz. I'm going to be moderating this podcast on men's health, specifically sports injury. And today I've got two very special people with me. First, Dr. Chester from DTAP, as well as Stephen Langdown, ex-professional MMA fighter. So I'm going to talk about DTAP first, okay? It sounds really cool, like a rap name. So DTAP stands for Dr. Tan and Partners, right? You're an established GP Plus clinic with over 10 clinics around Singapore. What is GP Plus, Dr. Chester?
Well, GP Plus is a form of healthcare which tries to bridge the gap between primary healthcare, like GP services, and specialist healthcare. Because a lot of times in Singapore, a lot of doctors just refer directly to the specialist very easily. So we try to bridge the gap. We try to manage many different conditions of the patient, which doesn't require specialist input. So that's the concept of a GP Plus.
And this is like new in Singapore, right?
Well, overseas, they've been doing it for quite a bit already. For example, in the US or the UK, the GP is the one that manages most of the conditions, right? And manages all of the issues.
You're like the gateway.
Exactly. Yeah, only if they can't manage it, for example, if it's not amenable to treatment or if it requires additional procedures or surgeries, then we will refer to the specialist.
Right.
So we're trying to take control and take charge of the healthcare of our patients.
So basically, GP Plus, you're like Superman, the Superman and women of the GP world.
We try to be. We try to be.
Cool. Yeah. That's why we got plus there. Okay, cool. So you guys have a vision to share information, medical information with the masses to make it easily digestible, accessible, and that's why you're doing this podcast.
Yep. So we believe that healthcare isn't just about giving medications. Healthcare is about holistic health of the patient. So it's about the mental healthcare. It's about the physical well-being of the patient as well. So the whole purpose of this podcast is to speak to the masses and give them some stories, give them some anecdotes, let them meet some people who are influential in their space, and to discuss some of these things that are relevant to healthcare in general.
We've got a great show today, I gotta say though. I'm dying to ask Stephen so many questions. This guy was a pro MMA fighter before, and I've seen one of those matches, lots of blood spewed all over the arena. I've seen shoulders dislocated, but we're going to get into that in a bit. I just want to give you a lowdown of what we can expect from today's podcast. We're going to be talking about mental health, okay, pre and post-fight mental stress. How do you deal with that? Physical, nutrition, fitness, and a very controversial testosterone replacement therapy. I see little chuckles there. We'll dive into that later, but let's start with, like, Steve, let's talk about you, man. Let's talk about your professional MMA fighter life. What was that like? How do you get into it? What was your specialty?
I started training for fun when I was 17.
How old are you this year?
I'm 29 now.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started training for fun at 17. I started just doing Muay Thai just as a way, of keeping fit. But I very quickly got very sucked into that world.
When you realize you're good at it.
Yeah, I don't think I was very good at it then at the start. But I've always been very competitive. I've always been an athlete. I used to be a sprinter for Singapore. And very quickly I wanted to try and be competitive. And a couple years later I signed with One Championship. I had 4 fights there, and then I retired in late 2015.
Okay,
yeah.
That's like still a good 7 years ago, in your early 20s.
Yeah.
Is that a normal age to retire?
No, it's not. But I had a couple of injuries that I was a little bit worried about. I was always very worried about head trauma. And I weighed the pros and cons of staying and keep fighting or retire and do something else. And I think retiring won out in the end. And I'm very happy with the decision I made.
Yeah.
And I don't regret it at all.
Yeah. Do you have like a near-death experience?
No. it was nothing that bad. But it was just the small things, right? Like my back was always in pain. I always had shooting pain through my right leg. Till today, when I sneeze, I still kind of see stars.
That's a fun
and that's very scary.
experience.
It's very scary. It's very scary, and I didn't want to see what could happen if it got any worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to weigh in on this? Like sneezing and seeing stars, Dr. Chester, is that normal?
Well, when you sneeze, what happens is you build up quite a lot of pressure in your head, in your lungs, in your abdomen as well. So sometimes with that increase in pressure. It can actually cause an increase in head pressure as well, what we call intracranial pressure, and that can cause you to see a little bit of stars.
Yeah.
I don't really know whether that's related to previous, traumatic
Head
brain
trauma,
injuries or head trauma, but it's something that you should take note of. If
That
it
could
gets
be good
worse,
news, though. That could mean my brain actually still works.
if it gets worse, you should check that out with a scan.
Do you have doubts that your brain is not working?
No, it works fine. No, it works fine. It works fine. My memory's fine. Everything's fine. It's just mainly the sneezing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's this pain that shoots up your leg still?
No, my lower back is much better now.
Okay.
And
you're
so
seeing
I
a
don't have
specialist
any
for it?
there. I did for a little while, but I was very young, right? When you're a young professional athlete, you like to think you're invincible. And if you just work through pain, anytime you take off kind of for recovery takes away from being able to train, being able to compete when you're young and just ready to go at it. You don't want to do any of that, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't do a lot of recovery work for it. Took a painkiller here and there.
It's that's not the way to go.
In general, when our patients come in with injuries, the best thing for you to do is to rest and go for physical therapy as well.
Yep.
Because a lot of times when you have injuries, the body can recover if it's not serious enough, but you would still require to rest. But I mean, as Stephen says, he's a very competitive person, and any downtime from training, which may affect your career, obviously athletes would want to have the balance between the two.
You have to weigh the pro and cons, right, of taking time off or just kind of working through it.
I think not enough emphasis is given to rest, because it feels like, I think to a competitive person, I'm not very competitive in the physical activity arena, but I can imagine the mindset of someone who's competitive. You need to always see results, like, you need to always keep going. So like to rest is like a non-activity. You feel like you're wasting time. It's like a lull in your activity calendar. But it really, I mean, you can like ascertain to that, like, that resting actually helps you recover.
Yes, because if you were to strain yourself unnecessarily, you might run into even more injuries, you see. So the best thing for you to do is to listen to your body. If your body is in pain, you should take a break. If the pain is affecting your function, that's probably even worse, and you should get the relevant investigations, including scans, x-rays, to see whether or not that you need additional rest or additional treatment for that. Because a lot of times when people overstress their bodies and they run into even more injuries, the downtime is going to be even longer. So that's something that I think
you
younger
just kick
athletes...
the can down the road, right?
Exactly.
You kick the can further and further away. And one day it will come back to bite you, but we don't like to think about that.
Not as of yet.
No.
You're still very young, let's put it that way.
Well, now I know better, right? Now I know sometimes you have to take one step back so you can take two steps forward.
That's a quotable moment right there, guys. Okay, so we're gonna, obviously you're a pro athlete before, so not many people have been in that space as you have, but we're trying to, like, of course, share as much as we can, like, so that it's relatable to a lot of people. And I think before you do anything like competitive or even like set about to just take the stage for any reason, there's always like anxiety and there's stress, right? I think a lot of people can relate to that. I still feel stressed, like after like 20 years of hosting, I still get really, like, I was stressed right before coming onto this because I've never met you guys before, and then I have to look like I've got it together, but now I'm slightly more relaxed because you guys look cool. But how do you deal with that sort of like pre-fight anxiety? Like, how do you cope with it? Or if you have any?
Oh, I definitely did, right? Especially when I first started fighting. I think the biggest thing for me I found was that you just have to accept you're about to go do this. You're about to go get in a cage and fight another man that wants to win just as much as you do, if not more. And I think the sooner you can come to terms with that, the easier it is. It's not about physical pain, right? Because you've done this for a long time. You know what physical pain feels like. It doesn't matter that much. For me, the mental stress was being worried about losing, what that means for my career, what that means for, long-term financial gain or not gain. And that's, I think, the part I struggled with the most. Just before, you walk out into an arena and you're trying to concentrate on fighting, and you have all this stuff running in your mind. But when you actually get out into a cage, then there's no time to think anymore, right? You have to fight. The referee says go and you fight.
So how do you like quieten that part of your mind that was distracting?
I put headphones on and play music, find my little happy space.
And what was that track?
Lose Yourself by Eminem. I found that very...
It's like, yeah, I need to beef up.
It helps me get in the moment and kind of outside of myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
And what do you think of his little method there?
I think a lot of Singaporeans are probably able to relate to that because everybody gets pre-exam jitters. Most people would have to do a public speech once in a while. So most people can relate to that. Maybe not with the element of the fighting and pain and physical pain, but most people can relate to having some pre-event jitters.
Yeah.
I think the best thing that you can do for yourself is to, number one, be well prepared as well, because the more prepared you are, the more you are likely to not screw up when you are doing the event. And at the same time, there are certain things you can do to help to put yourself in a better position to partake with that activity. One of the things that have been shown to be quite effective is actually this thing called essentially rehearsing it in your mind. If you have a mental image of what it will be like, if you go through the motion of it in your head, even before you go for that particular event, it shows that it helps you prepare mentally and physically as well. Even for fights, a lot of people visualize their fights, and you mentioned that you're a sprinter as well.
Yeah.
A lot of pro athletes, what they do is they close their eyes, they get down to the track, and they just imagine themselves doing that.
You see it happen first. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
The visualization bit of things definitely helps.
Yeah.
And being well prepared. I think those are some points that people can take away from this.
I'm just imagining everybody naked. I'm imagining that you two are naked right now. And that puts me at ease. Oh dear. So what is sleep like before a match? Like, I know like leading up to stepping into the arena, there are a lot of like, there's a lot of noise in the head.
Yeah.
But what about like the night before and leading up to the match?
Thankfully for me, I never had problems sleeping. I can sleep anywhere, anytime, which is wonderful. But a lot of the people that I spent a lot of time with would struggle to sleep the night before. They'd toss and turn. They'd visualize. They would, think about, what happens if I win? What happens if I lose? And you end up in this spiral where you get up the next day and you're exhausted. And you haven't even fought yet, right? Or you haven't competed yet. Yeah, thankfully for me, I just laid down and that was that.
And you just fell asleep.
And I just fell out.
Do you have any like tips for how to manage sleep?
Well, I have one pointer, which is you shouldn't be taking a sedative before a big event. There's a big difference between sleep versus sedation, right? Yeah. Sleep is restorative, but sedation is what you get from medications. And when we do EEGs, essentially when we do like an ECG for the brain, it's known that with sleep, you have certain types of brain waveforms. With sedation, it's just complete flat out. So most people, after they are sedated, they wake up feeling even more tired. They don't feel restored. So if you are nervous about a particular thing, I don't think taking medications, etc., before a big event is a great idea. Having said that, if you are having difficulty sleeping, you can try certain things which can help you fall asleep better. The first thing is to work on your sleep hygiene. Make sure that the environment that you are in is good for sleep. Essentially, no coffee after a certain timing. Make sure that the room is otherwise dark. Make sure that you can there's no distractions just before you sleep. So these are some of the things that you can do. Sleep hygiene. The other thing you can do is to tire yourself out really intensely in the day so that you'll be in a better position to fall asleep at night. But if you really can't sleep, I guess there's always the online method. Just watch something and fall asleep.
Yeah, well, I did a very quick Google search, as we always do these days. When we can't find a solution, or we need something there and then, and we don't have access to a doctor or like a doctor friend. I Googled it, and I gotta say that I'm not sure if I can say this, but what came up was masturbation.
It's actually known that specifically for guys, there is a period of time after masturbation that will put you in a bit more of a sleepy state. So I think it works for guys. I'm not too sure about females. I guess it tires you out.
It works.
Okay, it works.
Yeah.
It works.
I was like, yeah.
There you go.
I just need to put it out there, taking care of all your women, just so you know, you try that. Verified by doctor.
But having said that, there was this. I read this article once about how fighters, for the couple of weeks to maybe months before, they would avoid sexual intercourse, avoid masturbation, to build up that pent up energy.
Yeah, apparently that's the thing. I never did that. I never understood that.
Okay.
I don't know. That seems like a bit of a placebo, and I never did that. But it is quite a big thing in the combat sports world.
Yeah.
But I can't speak to any experience of that.
Yeah, it's I cannot sometimes.
It didn't seem like a good trade-off. No.
Yeah, like or you could just like indulge and then feel that confidence that you get from that indulging, and then bring that to you on the arena. Okay. Thanks for verifying that.
No worries.
I've always thought it was like, hocus pocus, like internet thing, and I was just built differently. So, okay, moving on. Physical fitness and nutrition. Like, what kind of routine do you put yourself through for physical fitness as a pro athlete? Was it like intense?
When I was still fighting, I'd be training, between 3 and 5 hours a day with a mixture of, strength and conditioning, doing technique classes.
Yeah. Every day?
I'd train 6 days a week. Sparring, grappling, all that sort of stuff. Which goes back to how you end up having so many little, injuries that add up over time. And when you train 6 days a week, there's not really a lot of time to take your foot off the gas.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is you pick up all these things, and they do grow, and they do eventually come back to haunt you, as almost every pro athlete ever has found themselves, I'm sure.
What was your most common injury from training?
My back gave me trouble for 5 years.
And this is from lifting weights?
From grappling a lot.
Yeah.
I wasn't very flexible, so anytime there was any flexion, especially backward with my back, in grappling, wrestling, it would hurt.
And it still does?
Not so much today, no. I took a long time off when I first stopped fighting, and that seemed to make it go away. Hopefully it stays that way. I don't want to have to live like that again. That was not fun.
Chester's dying to weigh in.
Yeah.
Well, it's good that the back pain has resolved.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned that you own a gym now as well.
I own a gym now. Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure that the exercise that you do most days will help to strengthen the back.
Absolutely.
As well. Yeah. So the best thing you can do when you have back pain is to rest and strengthen the muscles that support the back.
What about flexibility? Is there something that if you're not born flexible, this is something that you can kind of train and hone, for a guy especially?
I think everybody is born not too flexible, and it's the things that you do in life that will increase your flexibility. So if, for example, when you were younger, you did lots of sports, or you went for dance or ballet classes, or you were just more involved, more active, you would usually be a bit more flexible as compared to someone who didn't do all these activities. Having said that, yes, you can actually gain flexibility the older you get. There are many people who picked up yoga, for example, when they are in their late 20s, and they have increased the amount of flexibility that they have. So it can be something that can be trained. Yeah. So maybe you should have stretched a bit more as well.
I probably should have. I definitely should have. Hindsight being 2020 and all, I definitely should have.
So would you think flexibility is an important component? Having flexibility is important in fitness to kind of reduce injuries?
Yeah, I think it is important, because if you are not flexible, you can't correct your motions a bit easier, and whenever the joints, whenever the ligaments and the muscles are pushed past a certain limit, that's where you run into a bit more injuries. If you can increase the limit by doing stretching, it can actually prevent some joint injuries, especially, and lots of back injuries, for example.
Yeah, a very long time ago, I was dancing professionally, and I'm not a naturally flexible person. So what we used to do was to kind of split our legs up, sit on the floor, split our legs up, and then push our chest closer to the wall, like pelvis towards the wall, and just keep doing that until your pelvis literally touches the wall, right?
Full split. Yeah.
Full split. And I remember going on a break, like it was like a seven-day break, like just overseas for like short getaway. Came back, lost it. Because I didn't do that during holiday, right?
Yep.
And I lost about like 8 inches from, I was like away from the wall. It's like something that you just can't stop doing. And now I can't touch my toes.
Neither can I.
Oh dear.
Neither can I.
But it's good to know that I can train that back. Yeah.
Slowly though, if you push yourself a bit too hard, that's where you run into problems.
Okay. And what about like stretching as well? Like, a lot of people seem to think that stretching is pretty much, doing all these kinds of, warm-ups. Warm-ups seems to, like a lot of people for warm-ups, they seem to do a lot of stretching immediately. But I kind of read somewhere that the muscle is kind of like a dried spaghetti. Like, you need to kind of boil it first before you like stretch it. If not, it will snap. So like a warm-up would be like running instead of like stretching. Is that correct?
They do. Nowadays, a lot of people are doing what we call dynamic stretching before your workout. So dynamic stretching is essentially not static stretching where you just stay in one particular position.
Yeah.
You bounce a little bit, you swing your legs, you swing your arms, etc. And then after that dynamic stretching, you do your workout. And after the workout, then you can do a bit more of these static stretches.
Right. Okay.
Did you do that?
Yes, I found that was the best way, and it's what I still do today.
The bouncing stretches.
The dynamic stuff at the start, and then the static stuff at the end.
Nice. And how do you actually prepare your body for like a fight?
I've always eaten very clean. I'm not a big fan of like fried food or fast food. So for me, that was always quite simple.
So boiled chicken breasts, egg yolks, and whites.
Not all the way. Not just broccoli, brown rice, and chicken, right?
Yeah.
But that was the foundation of it. Actually, now that I think about it, yeah.
How do you date? What was dating you like?
It was miserable, I think. It still is.
So what would the situation be like on date night?
Well, I can still go out. I can have, steak and asparagus, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that. So I don't think, now that you say it, I never thought about it, but now I don't think it was ever much of a problem. I just wouldn't have dessert, right? I'm lactose intolerant anyway, so I don't take a lot of dessert. I don't eat ice cream.
Do you have any cravings?
No.
You're built so differently from everyone.
Not really.
Usually it's a struggle for people to keep like some sort of a fitness diet, right? But for you, it's like, you know what, I hate food,
it's been what I've always known, right?
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of other people have known from a young age the opposite of that.
Yeah.
And it's just
Mom's cooking. Mom's cooking.
She always cooks very healthy. My mom eats very healthy.
So that's nostalgia for you then. It's normal.
It's just nurture, I guess.
Nice.
Yeah, for me, it's nature. I'm naturally greedy, so I'm always fighting with my weight. But I try my best. Yeah, I think when it comes to nutrition, the best thing is to just choose the correct sort of foods. There are lots of fancy diets nowadays, things like intermittent fasting, keto diets, etc. I think do whatever works well for you as long as you can achieve an overall caloric deficit throughout the day if you're trying to lose weight.
Okay, wait. So caloric deficit, right? So how much calories does like an average adult need? Like, is it calculated according to height and weight, or like just gender?
There's two components to how much calories you need. What
I
is
like to
needed
hear
for
both sides.
Sure.
what's needed for your essentially basal metabolism, and the others are for your exercise-related activities. So in general, for people who are relatively sedentary, maybe for males, anywhere from about 1,800 to about 2,000 calories.
Okay.
Females, maybe about 200 calories lesser.
Okay, so
But
1,600.
if you are more active, then of course you have to eat a bit more.
Okay. And what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, that, and for me, it scales as well with how active you were, right? When I was still fighting, I would have to eat a lot more.
And
and if you keep eating that amount, it was close 3,000-ish a day.
Well, that's a lot.
probably in his terms, because he'll probably eat like a kilogram of broccoli.
Yeah, that's
or
a lot of
something.
broccoli.
Yeah, you
But
know.
it's
But
3
for us,
plates
it's
of
like one
char kway
laksa.
Exactly. Yeah, and I don't really enjoy eating.
Yeah.
So I was finding myself having to shovel chicken down my throat. It was not fun. But you get so used to it, right? And then when you stop training that much, you do see, oh, hang on, I need to then now taper this because I'm not using all these calories. And then you end up in a calorie surplus and end up putting on weight,
Yeah.
which is not what
So
I wanted.
do you carry a scale with you? Like
I used to measure my food, yeah.
Oh,
I
dear.
don't do that anymore. It's too much work. But when I was competing, when you fight in specific weight classes,
Yeah.
and you have to come in the bracket, right? So
Yeah.
you can't really leave too much to chance.
wow.
Do you sit in a sauna and
Yeah.
sweat it out and like restrict your water intake before weigh-ins?
Yeah, so I used to fight at 61 kilos, and typically about 48 hours before the weigh-in, I'd be about 68, 69 kilos. You'd water load, cut sodium, and then I wouldn't have anything to eat or drink for about 24 hours.
Before a
Seven
fight.
7 kilos water.
Oh
It was
my
not fun. It was not fun.
How do you lose 7 kilos of water in
the
one
problem
day?
is everyone does it, right? Because you have 24 hours from the weigh-in to the fight, or 36. Sorry, you have 36 hours, right?
Okay.
And everyone wants an edge. Everybody wants to be a little bit bigger in the cage. So if you're not doing it, you end up on fight night. If you were actually 61 kilos, you end up fighting someone that's 68, 70 kilos. That's massive difference at that weight.
Right.
They'll be so much stronger than you. They'll be so much bigger than you, right? So it's this endless zero-sum game of everyone just doing it because the other person's doing it.
Right. So that means that you're technically about 68 kilograms,
Yes.
but when you lose the water weight, you are like 61.
61
But you're
kilos.
mass-wise, you're still 68.
68, because by the time you get in the cage the next day, right, you've had an IV, you've eaten again, and you're the exact same person you were 36 hours ago, but for some reason you went through that entire cycle,
Wow.
and you come back to square one.
I think there's a lot of stress on the body.
It's a lot of stress.
So I think when it comes to fighting, you really have to weigh the pros and cons. I
Yes.
don't think it's just the injuries, but it's also the
There is that as well,
stresses.
because that can't be good for you. Because I remember, and it's always, the last like 500 grams where you're stepping on a scale. You can't really stand up, right? Most of the time you'd have to sit cross-legged on a scale and look down and see, how far you were away, and someone would have to drag you, and you're wearing trash bags that tries to keep the heat in, right? So you're constantly sweating.
Oh, wow.
And then, and you're rubbing like Epsom salts on you and in the bath, right? So you either do the sauna
Yeah.
or the hot bath, both of which are equally miserable. And that definitely can't be good for you, no.
I feel so sad just listening to you say
It
that.
was very sad.
It's just like,
It was very sad.
dude, it started from like, I hate food.
Yeah. Oh,
But I'm glad that's behind you
that's
now.
behind me. I don't want to ever do that again. No.
Yeah. Do you get like mild PTSD from looking at a sauna now?
No,
or trash
I do
bags?
enjoy sitting in the sauna still, but not for 7 kilos lost, no.
Wow, I never knew that. There's hope for me.
It's all temporary, and none of that you keep.
Okay. We're stunned.
Yeah, because we are experiencing the PTSD for him.
For me, thank you.
I'm just like, ooh, like it's just hit after hit after hit.
Yeah.
So what do you do these days? Like train?
I still train 6 days a week, but nowhere near the intensity of that. I just don't have the time or the energy for that. But I still lift 5-6 days a week. I'll do cardio in 3 or 4 of those days as well.
What is like a good workout plan for like a regular human being like me? Like I try to do Bukit Timah Hill like once a week, and I feel like I'm damn fit already. So then the rest of the week I'm like pretty much horizontal watching Netflix.
Yep.
Sometimes I feel like swimming, maybe I don't. That's not enough, right? Because it sounds like it's not enough.
But I think that depends also on what you want to achieve, right? Not everybody wants to work out 6 days a week.
Yeah.
Not everyone has the time for it. Not everyone has the interest for it. It's definitely not necessary to work out 6 days a week.
But what about like to build stamina and then in a comfortable way, not like intense?
Yeah.
Just for the average human being to not be unfit when they turn 60. What would be a good workout plan?
Well, there are some guidelines on the Health Promotion Board's website. In general, I usually tell my patients about 3 to 4 times a week,
Damn, I'm way below.
20 to 30 minutes each time, moderate intensity exercise. So what's moderate intensity? Low intensity is when you can speak in full sentences.
Okay.
Moderate intensity is when, for example, a light jog, where you have to speak in short phrases because you are a little bit out of breath, right?
So that's the one that I need to go for.
Something like that, that's probably moderate intensity. Some people use heart rates to monitor how intense the workout is. But yeah, in general, about 150 minutes, 100 to 150 minutes of exercise a week, that should be good.
And what if I do that all in one day?
Well, it depends on how fit you are. If you are as fit as Stephen, then, go ahead. But if you are just starting out, I would highly suggest you do progressive training.
Okay.
Start off with low impact, gentle exercises first and ramp your way up slowly. I mean, you have the rest of your life to exercise. There's no need to fit everything all into one. So it's really about being slow and steady. We run into a lot of problems where people are just starting to get back into exercise, and if they go a bit too hard, they end up with lots of knee injuries. That's very common. Back injuries, lots of shoulder problems as well, ankle injuries as well. So start slow and progressively ramp up the exercise instead of going 100 minutes all at once.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the time I take to climb the hill. So I'm just wondering, can I get away with that?
Well, as long as you clock that minutes in, I think that should be good. There's this concept in sports and fitness as well, where it's the cumulative amount of stress that you put on the muscles, not all at one shot, but throughout the whole entire week, that gets you a bit fitter. That's one school of thought. The other school of thought is to stress out the muscle as much as possible, but then there you run into the risk of injuries.
Okay, good to know. Okay, so now we want to dive into this controversial topic that's got you, the juicy one that's gotten you smirking and you I'm not sure what to say, Chester. It's called testosterone replacement therapy. What on earth is that?
Doctor?
Well, testosterone is a hormone that is naturally produced inside the body, in much higher quantities in males as compared to females, but females also do have testosterone. Testosterone is an anabolic hormone. Essentially, if it's present in large quantities, it helps you get bigger. It helps with even your motivation, so the mental aspect of things. It helps with recovery as well. It helps you become stronger, train harder, recover faster. So you can see why that has an unfair advantage if someone was abusing these medications in a competitive setting. In fact, the World Doping Agency has already said that testosterone is clearly a performance-enhancing drug, and it shouldn't be used for professional athletes.
So in my mind, women have more estrogen and men have more testosterone. That's what we're born with. Is that accurate?
Yes, yeah, that's accurate. But the ratios are very different. So for guys also do have estrogen inside their blood, but the proportion of testosterone is significantly higher, and for females it's the reverse.
Oh my goodness, you guys are born to recover better than females?
Well,
what is the point of that again? We give birth?
That's a good point.
I mean, there are physical and structural differences between males versus females. This is just how genetics is.
Because you're more rash, mentally. That's why you need to, you get probably into more brawls and fights, and therefore you need that testosterone. I'm just trying to figure out.
Isn't that from the testosterone?
Yeah, I think there is probably
a cause and effect there.
A biological advantage, or rather something in our evolution that required it like this. But, for a lot of athletes, what they're doing is they're trying to push their testosterone levels to supra-physiological levels, to levels that are above what is considered the normal range.
So, Stephen, I see you smirking a lot when we talk about TRT, testosterone replacement therapy. Why? What was in your headspace?
Well, I think for far too long, it's been such a taboo topic that people feign ignorance about, and people like to claim that the world's top athletes aren't using performance-enhancing drugs. What a lot of people, fans in my experience, fail to realize is when when the competitive edge is so small, so fine, razor thin, right, at the top echelons of sport, be it golf, tennis, any sport, and where, you know, there are millions and millions of dollars on the line, people will find every edge they can get. Lance Armstrong, right? He was disgraced essentially. But then they later found out that, hang on, every other cyclist was also on a whole assortment of stuff, right? And it happens whether or not people want to believe it, right? People like to see their sporting heroes as heroes and think, no, they wouldn't cheat. No, I won't speak for all of them. But it's more common than people think. I don't understand the taboo behind it. I am of the school of thought, let's just, you know, let everyone do it, and then now we have a level playing field.
How do you actually test for testosterone enhancement therapy, like, or a replacement? I mean, if you already have testosterone in your body, and that it's already agreed on that males have a higher level of testosterone than estrogen in their bodies, having just more testosterone, how do you kind of gauge that it's from like a drug? It's like a natural thing, isn't it? Like in your body.
From a medical point of view, there are some symptoms that a person can display if their testosterone is a bit low. Things like lowered sex drive, you know, fatigue, lowered motivation, you know, things like erectile dysfunction. So these are some medical symptoms that a patient may present with. And what we usually do is we do a blood test to check the testosterone level. And in these patients, if they are otherwise low, the approved indication for the usage of exogenous testosterone, that means testosterone that's coming from the outside, either in the form of pills, patches, you know, gels or injections. These have been shown when we increase the testosterone from a low level to a normal level, that the patient will feel a lot better. But when it comes to your question about testing whether or not a person has used testosterone, there are some indicators that we can use. We can check the higher brain hormones, things like luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone. There are certain metabolites of certain types of testosterone that are tested inside the doping agencies as well, that they see. Nowadays, they're freezing urine samples and freezing hair samples and things like that, for testing 10 years down the road, you know, because it's always a cat and mouse game where they are trying to find the latest thing that wouldn't be detected. For all you know, it might be detected 10 years in the future.
Down the road.
I saw a documentary on Netflix about this guy who was trying to dope, you know, to see if he could perform at his peak, right? He was a cycling thing. I can't remember the name of it.
No, that's
yes. That's the one. That's the one. And he went on he went on this doping like journey, and he found that his performance wasn't that much better than when he didn't dope.
I think there are many factors when it comes to performance and hormones as well. It's not that if you were to take the hormones, you
suddenly become good, right?
You'd still you'd still have to put in the effort. You would still have to put in the training, because if you don't, then it's just all going to go to waste in essence. But
so then why is it so controversial then? If it still doesn't make you, you know,
it can.
Okay.
But it can, and I think people don't like cheating, right? Especially when it's not across the board. Not everyone has access to the same kind of doping, right? More successful people have better quality stuff, you know. And he talked about how stuff that goes undetected, right? Only people that have the top dollar can buy this stuff, right? Whereas, you know, athletes that don't have access to that stuff, they end up using lower grade / tier doping, and they end up getting flagged and caught in tests.
And when we talk about doping, we're talking about like testosterone replacement therapy.
Not just testosterone, there are many types of anabolic hormones, even things like steroids or beta agonists, or even things like, you know, estrogen receptor modulators. All these are all things that can give the athlete just that bit of an edge. When you're talking about just that small little advantage, as mentioned by Stephen, every athlete will try to maximize the amount of advantage they will have.
Is this common in Singapore, you think? Can you tell when a fellow athlete has doped?
I think in some cases, there are kind of limitations to what a human male or female should kind of look like. And
Also, it's a physical appearance.
more often than not.
Yeah.
And sometimes people fall quite widely outside that scale.
So they look pretty much
there-
like beasts.
And is there something to maybe think about or question there? Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. I come to think of it, like the gym I used to go to, won't name names, but there was this one guy who would come in and he just looks like this massive thing.
Brick house, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like a fridge, like a building, you know. He just comes in and his back was just full of acne. And I was like, that sounds like a surge in testosterone to me.
I think it's
He's
more
not saying it,
common.
he's like zipped.
Yeah.
I think it's more common than people realize, but not just within the professional circles, even in the amateur circles as well. In my practice, I do see quite a number of patients who are using testosterone by themselves.
Yeah.
And they've come to me to essentially check whether or not their kidneys are okay, livers are okay, whether or not their hormones are otherwise okay as well. So I think if you really want to do it at the amateur/professional level, just make sure that you know what you're doing and there's a medical professional that you can actually seek advice from to make sure you're not harming your body.
Yeah.
Because a lot of this, for lack of a better word, it's bro science.
Yes.
Bro science.
It's bro
I
science.
learned a new
Yeah.
word.
Yeah, so it's the best thing for you to do is to do it as safely as possible if you were to want to do
it.
Yeah.
And I love that there's no judgment. You're like 100% like, come to me, let's have an open conversation. And that's the kind of stuff you do at DTAP, isn't it?
Yes, I think a lot of times there's a lot of stigma associated with it, but as long as the patient understands the risk involved, I think the best thing a doctor can do is to let the person do it in as safe a manner as possible. Sure, you have to explain that there could be risk to your fertility, risk to your health, risk to your heart, your livers, kidneys, etc. But as long as the patient understands and as long as you can try to make their journey a little bit safer, because they're going to do it no matter what, then I think that is an improvement from them just going blindly.
Thank you so much for this, Dr. Chester, and thanks so much for sharing
My pleasure.
your history and your experience, Steve. Can I call you Steve?
That's fine. Yeah.
That's fine. I like that. We're on like first name basis right now. So we want to keep the conversation going, right? Like this is a podcast, obviously, like, what can we do? Like, people tuning into this podcast, they want to find out more. Is there a channel that we can go to, Dr. Chester?
Well, they can check out DTAP's website at www.dtapclinics.com. There's a whole list of services that we provide that can be found on the website. Alternatively, you can just come in, have a chat with one of us doctors. We're all very friendly.
They don't bite. All right, my name is Roz. This has been the DTAP podcast. I'm signing out.